Welcome to the debate.
Our source material today, it really offers a much needed, injection of optimism into the environmental discussion. We're looking at some truly remarkable recent successes.
Yeah, successes spanning everything from the deep ocean to the atmosphere, and even some very specific terrestrial efforts.
And the fundamental question these victories, I think, make us ask is one of institutional power. Do major lasting environmental wins depend primarily on these big binding top-down international agreements?
Or are they more reliably achieved through, say, focused national mobilization, dedicated local protection, and just relying on natural resilience?
Exactly.
And today, I'll be arguing that for threats that are truly global, systemic, and industrial, the kind that affects all nations, the only reliable path to victory is through robust, comprehensive global regulatory frameworks. For me, the Montreal Protocol is the superior model.
And I come at it from a different angle. While I think systemic regulation has its place, I believe the most effective and crucially repeatable model involves a more concentrated, sovereign commitment. You halt the immediate destruction, and then you trust in the inherent power of natural systems to recover. I'm championing focused national action, using the return of blue whales to the Seychelles and the mobilization we've seen in Burkina Faso.
Okay, so if we look at the history of environmental recovery, there is one undeniable sort of high watermark for managing these global problems, and that is the multilateral binding treaty system, specifically the Montreal Protocol from back in 1987. This treaty targeted chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs, industrial chemicals used in everything from aerosols to refrigeration. These substances were the culprit. They were creating the massive hole in the stratospheric ozone.
Right.
And what made this model work so powerfully? Well, first, the science was unequivocal. Second, the mechanism wasn't just built on targets. It was built on mandatory phase-outs, on verification. This comprehensive industrial-level coordination led to a 99% reduction in the emissions of these substances. We're not just talking local change here. We're talking about successfully rerouting global industrial supply chains.
A huge undertaking.
Exactly, and the result is quantifiable. It's predictable. The Antarctic ozone hole is expected to recover completely by 2066, with recovery in the tropics and Arctic even sooner. This scope, identifying a pervasive global threat, establishing clear cause and effect, and then executing a coordinated global response, that just cannot be achieved through decentralized efforts. The system itself is the conservation victory.
I'm sorry, but I don't really buy that the highest standard must always be the most complex mechanism. The Montreal Protocol is often cited because it's a singular success story where all the variables, the clear science, the relative ease of finding industrial substitutes, and this very palpable global threat of skin cancer, they all aligned perfectly. And that alignment is, it's extremely rare. True environmental success, I would argue, is more often found in the raw power of natural resilience. You couple that with specific, decisive protective measures, which are often far more politically achievable than these, decade-long global consensus efforts. Consider the blue whales. The largest animals on Earth, they were hunted almost to oblivion in the Seychelles by the Soviet whaling fleet in the 1960s.
Right.
The victory we're celebrating today is born from simply stopping that destruction and giving nature a chance to do its work. Scientists tracked their return using year-long underwater acoustic monitoring, and they detected their characteristic, extremely low-frequency sounds that can measure up to 188 decibels. It's the loudest sustained sound in the animal kingdom. And they're locating a specific population group returning to what seems to be a crucial nursery or reproduction area. The success here relies on protection and stewardship, not complex industrial mandates.
Okay.
And then look at the terrestrial example of Burkina Faso. They're faced with an existential fight against desertification, and they use centralized national will inspired by this legacy of revolutionary mobilization from Thomas Sankara to plant 5 million trees in a single hour. This was a highly targeted, rapid victory against an impending, ecological point of no return, which was needed because their population has tripled in recent decades. This high mobilization approach is immediate and it's effective.
I see why you frame resilience as a virtue, but let me give you a different perspective on this idea of resilience versus regulation, specifically when it comes to the predictability of success. The blue whale recovery, while it's profoundly moving, it relies entirely on the biological resilience of a species that is still vastly depleted. It's inherently unpredictable. We don't control the timeline, we just sort of hope the population curve keeps going up.
Well, we can help it along.
Of course, but by contrast, the global system established by the Montreal Protocol provided measurable, scientifically predictable recovery timelines for the ozone layer. This regulatory certainty it's fundamental to effective large-scale environmental management. If a recovery timeline spans 50 years and requires the continuous compliance of hundreds of nations, relying on a system of law and measurable targets provides far greater management certainty than, well, relying on biological chance.
That's an interesting point about certainty, but I would frame the discussion around attainability and repeatability, rather than the singular, almost miraculous achievement of Montreal. The regulatory framework you're championing is just politically exhausting to replicate, especially now with shifting geopolitical priorities. The Seychelles model, however, is a more repeatable mechanism of decisive sovereign action. The country didn't wait for a global treaty to declare its waters a sanctuary. They protected 400,000 square kilometers of ocean through a debt-for-nature swap. And this is a critical detail. It links financial mechanisms directly to localized political will. It enables immediate stewardship. It shows that nations, by taking control of their own environmental destiny, can achieve immediate large-scale protection, securing the recovery of that specific blue whale population far quicker than waiting for some complex international mandate.
But if your model relies on resilience and local protection, aren't you necessarily introducing a catastrophic element of uncertainty that global standards are designed to remove? Let's stick with the Seychelles. The scientists themselves, they expressed immediate concern about the looming threat of noise pollution. This is a transboundary issue. Just like CFCs, it travels efficiently through the water.
Okay.
The sound of a blue whale, which can travel for hundreds, even thousands of kilometers, is essentially being drowned out by human noise. Local protection of that area, even a huge one, cannot solve this oceanic acoustic smog. So doesn't the fact that noise pollution from distant shipping lanes, we're talking the equivalent of a constant jet engine, doesn't that mean that international standards, something analogous to the CFC ban, are ultimately necessary to truly protect even that quiet refuge?
Local protection only shields them from local threats. It can't protect their acoustic world.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning, because the core intervention that yielded the success we're talking about was local, and it was decisive, stopping the whalers and formally protecting the area. That's what worked. The recovery happened because the immediate acute stressor was removed. The science has confirmed that right now there's no great traffic of ships near the Seychelles, which makes it a nice, quiet, safe place. For now. The success lies in acting decisively to establish and finance that sanctuary. For now, yes.
And similarly, look at the challenge in Burkina Faso. Their population has tripled. That puts enormous pressure on land already suffering desertification. It's a localized, existential pressure. Their high mobilization campaign, planting those 5 million trees, it focused specifically on medicinal plants. It linked environmental stewardship directly to community health resilience. That concentrated national effort directly addressed their unique internal threat, something a distant global climate treaty might completely fail to prioritize.
But that level of focused, centralized national mobilization, especially when drawing on a specific and highly politicized historical legacy like Thomas Sankara's, which demanded intense popular discipline, that's also difficult to replicate across different political systems, isn't it? If the Seychelles model requires innovative finance that many nations can't access, and the Burkina Faso model requires a unique political history, how can you argue for its superior repeatability compared to the institutional mechanisms of a global treaty that, once adopted, applies universally to all participants?
That's an excellent point about the political specifics, but I would argue that concentrated national will, even when it is politically unique, is a more frequent occurrence in history than a fully successful binding multilateral treaty on industrial emissions. We saw this national drive in the Seychelles, where the threat to biodiversity was linked to an opportunity for financial reform through that debt for nature swap. And let's talk about the motivation behind the tree planting campaign in Burkina Faso, the Hora Patriótica pelo Reflorestamento de Faso. The dedication is rooted in profound community engagement and a shared moral mandate. The minister there noted that the tree is seen as a fundamental pillar that purifies the air, feeds the body, and treats our diseases. This is not an abstract concept. It is life itself. This shared, internalized dedication, it generates a momentum that global treaties, which are often just distant legal instruments, they just can't match. This moral urgency is what lets them act so rapidly.
I acknowledge that profound community engagement drives the execution on the ground. I do. However, even if the motivation is rooted in health and survival, that grassroots energy cannot replace the coordination needed to address these high-level industrial threats. The Montreal Protocol succeeded because the science was so clear, and the threat, skin cancer, was easily understood globally.
Right. This clarity enabled leaders to develop a systematic solution, mandate the replacement of industrial substances. While localized action like planting medicinal trees is crucial for improving local resilience, it cannot replace the global coordination needed to systematically dismantle pervasive industrial threats, like persistent chemicals, or in the case of oceanic noise, control the global shipping fleet. We need global regulatory action to manage global externalities, and we need it to be mandatory and predictable.
Okay.
Ultimately, our material shows diverse models of success, but for systemic, industrialized threats that cross all borders, the type of management required to protect the global commons, the Montreal Protocol, it remains the highest standard. It required systematic intervention in every industrialized nation's output, and it provides quantifiable scientific proof that large-scale binding regulatory change can succeed. And I maintain that the most potent path to recovery is fundamentally driven by sovereign commitment to local protection and the inherent resilience of nature. Whether it's the blue whales reclaiming their ancient habitat in the Seychelles, facilitated by innovative national finance, or Burkina Faso achieving unprecedented mobilization against desertification, it is the focused, local, and immediate political action that provides the initial and most potent pathway for the revitalization of life.
And the necessary monitoring confirms that the challenge is never static, regardless of which pathway you choose. We have to track the expected recovery date of the ozone hole, just as we must ensure the Seychelles waters remain a quiet refuge from increasing noise pollution. The initial victory is really just the beginning of sustained management.
Indeed. The material confirms that environmental achievement requires these different scales of commitment and institutional invention. And our understanding is certainly sharpened by weighing the efficacy and the repeatability of both top-down global regulation and, well, bottom-up sovereign stewardship.